Hello, this is Todd Luck, and I think Jason Momoa is a fantastic action hero. I thought he was a great Aquaman. I think he's going to be absolutely perfect as Lobo in the upcoming Supergirl movie. But what I truly believe the role he was born to play is Conan. This is a review of the 2011 Conan the Barbarian movie starring Jason Momoa. And I can't describe to you how thrilled I was with this movie when it came out. This is made by fans, for fans, but this time deciding to actually try to create a Conan that is like the source material. For the first time, I was able to see on the screen the same Conan that I'd been reading about in the short stories and the comics for most of my life. Jason Momoa is the most Conan-ish Conan who has ever Conaned in a Conan movie. So let's just get this out of the way. Of course, he looks just like Conan, or at least the Frank Frazetta paintings of Conan that define the modern look of the character. I mean, in real life, he looks like a Frazetta-style barbarian. Surprisingly, the producers actually did not see this when he originally auditioned. I don't know, maybe they thought they were casting for Detective Conan instead of Conan the Barbarian, but thank goodness the director saw the obvious and sold them on Momoa being Conan. The reason they had Conan's face get scarred in this movie is so they could actually use the real life scar that Jason Momoa has on his eyebrow that he got in a real bar fight. Now, of course, movies are not cosplay, and it takes a lot more than just looking like a character to embody them, but we'll talk about what he brings to the character in his performance a little bit later. And no, this is not a remake of Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger from the 80s. This is a completely new movie. It just happens to be based on the same character. Now, Arnie's two movies, Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer, are very different from the source material. He plays a Conan-like barbarian, but is just not Conan, not the one that we see in the short stories or the comics. But that's fine. It's the 80s. You expected that when you went to see an adaptation on the big screen. They were going to take the basic concepts and remake it into something new that would work in that movie. And those movies are good for what they are. I certainly think the original Conan the Barbarian is a good piece of filmmaking. And I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, certainly grew as an actor after that. And, he would go on to have a heck of a career. He would trample the electoral districts of California under his sandaled feet and become a governor by his own hand. Schwarzenegger is an American institution. And so if he's the only version of Conan that you like or that you're aware of, that's fine. More power to you. And yes, I do feel your frustration that there was never a third Schwarzenegger Conan movie made. And who knows, maybe at some point it'll happen. But to me, the sword and sorcery movies of this era are just kind of okay. And I really started to enjoy those kinds of movies after the 80s when they had to go back to the source material and gave us three movies that I really loved that adapted Robert E. Howard's most popular characters, starting with Cole the Conqueror, which got the themes of Robert E. Howard's stories correct. And then there was Solomon Kane, which I think absolutely nailed the atmosphere that's in those stories. And then to me, I love those movies, but Conan with Jason Momoa is still the pinnacle because it gets both the themes and the atmosphere right while also getting the character of Conan correct. And so, my friends, my recommendation on how to watch this movie is go get you a DVD or Blu-ray, because this is a 2011 movie back when they put effort into the extras. And so you have two commentaries, you have some behind-the-scenes featurettes, and best of all, you have a short featurette on the life of Robert E. Howard, the man who created Conan, and also a longer featurette on the entire Conan franchise, everything they've ever done with the character. And there's even bits where they talk to the guy who runs heroic signatures, and he gives his hot takes on everything that's ever been done with the character. It gives you some very interesting insights into the direction of the franchise, including why Conan left Marvel for Dark Horse some years ago and why Dark Horse took him in the direction that they did. If you're not familiar with Conan, this is a great Barbarian starter pack for you. And if you are a fan, this is a great celebration of Conan. So, what makes this movie work? Well, first of all, it has an adequate budget. And that may sound super basic, but it's usually not the case with these Barbarian movies. But this has enough budget to put in magic and monsters and create a whole world that Conan lives in and make it look good. And then there is just a heck of a lot of talent that worked on this movie, led by director Marcus Nespel. He directed both the reboots of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Friday the 13th, but probably most importantly for this movie is that he directed Pathfinder, which I highly recommend. Pathfinder has a bunch of villainous Vikings come to pre colonial America, and it is just really, really good stuff. The movie is shot in Bulgaria, which provides them with the absolute perfect locations to shoot in, right? They shot everywhere from snowy mountains to the inside of caves, but it also gave them the great talent of Bulgarian stuntmen. And you can see that throughout the movie, including right at the beginning, you see these kids from a Bulgarian parkour team in the young Conan sequence. It's pretty spectacular stuff. And the production looks fantastic. The sets and costumes are practical when possible. You know, they built the Sumerian village, they built the scaffolding for the big fight with the sand monsters. The sand monsters are stunt people who have makeup and costume on instead of CG effects. Lots of impressive stunt work in there, both by the extras and by the main actors themselves. And some of that involves some minor injuries, some of that blood and some of that pain you see on the screen is real. Conan had to go to a chiropractor after his first fight with Kalar Zim. Jason Momoa also accidentally stabbed someone in the foot on the pirate ship. These things happen in these movies. And unfortunately, a stuntman did fall on his head in that scene with the monster, and he did split his head open a bit and had to go to the hospital. The movie doesn't adapt any particular Conan stories, but you will definitely recognize some moments in there. It's really trying to capture the essence of that character. And the reason why they didn't try to adapt any of the Howard short stories is because they are short stories and wouldn't necessarily make a lot of sense to try to shoehorn into a movie unless you were doing an anthology like Sin City. Probably the Howard stuff is more appropriate for, say, a streaming series or something like that. And so all the characters other than Conan were created for the movie. And so, no, they don't use any of the Howard characters like Valeria or Belit or the villainous Thothamon. But characters like that, if you want to do them right, would require a good bit of screen time. And I think it was a very good call to focus that first movie on Conan being Conan. And then for the sequels, you could bring in Belit and Valeria and people like that. While certainly not a remake, there are a couple of things that have become so synonymous with the character from the original movies that the director felt the need to incorporate them into this new one. One was that Conan's father does some philosophical musings while forging his sword, and the other is that, of course, the villains attack Conan's village when he's young and kill everybody, including his father. And so years later, when he comes across those villains again, he goes on a vengeance quest where he tracks them down and kills them all. That is unique to this movie, but the villains here are just a catalyst for Conan to go around and do Conan stuff. All of the vital parts of this character who make him what he is are here. And that starts right at the beginning with a Samaria, Conan's homeland, straight out of Robert E. Howard and the Dark Horse comics. I just was floored. Ron Perlman makes the absolute perfect father for Conan, and Leo Howard knocks it out of the ballpark playing young Conan. You can see the intense drive in him to become greater, his frustration between this gulf between who he wants to be and who he is now. And you can just tell that he's just this force that cannot be contained by his little small country of Samaria. And once his village is destroyed, we are told that he chooses to leave Samaria, that he wanders the world, learning and growing wherever he goes. He becomes a thief, a pirate, a warrior, a leader of men. And he is not necessarily a nice person. He is not a hero. He has a rage in him that can scare even the gods. There are times when Conan is scarier than the villains, but he still has a code of honor, a morality that was instilled in him in his Sumerian childhood that oftentimes brings him at odds with the cruelty he sees in civilization, and oftentimes will put him on the side of the angels when it starts hitting the fan. And his first scenes as an adult, we see the hypocrisies and excesses of civilization that disgust him in slavery and in how the people were treated at the prison. And then he goes on a mythic quest to go kill a warlord and witch. And so that, my friends, is pure 100% proof Conan directly on the screen. And along this epic quest, you're going to get pretty much every fight scene you would expect to get from this character. There's an epic one in his childhood. I'm not going to spoil that one. And once he's an adult, you get to check off all your Conan boxes, right? There is an incredible horse chase. There's an epic fist fight, a massive group battle on a pirate ship, incredible sword battles, and Conan has to fight demonic spirits summoned by a witch, and there's an appropriately placed monster that Conan has to survive. And normally in a movie like this, there might be one, maybe two epic fight scenes that are really memorable. But in this movie, every single one of these is epic and memorable leading up to the final battle. And it's very impressive. The choreography is amazing. It feels intense, it feels interesting, but it also still feels very gritty and real as it should. And also the finishing moves. The villains are a collection of some very cool looking warlords from all over the world, and Conan hunts them down and kills them in extremely creative ways. I don't know why the Schwarzenegger version of Conan is in Mortal Kombat, because this is the one that's got the finishing moves. As far as the actors go, as I said, this movie is all about the Conan, and so it is Jason Momoa's movie, and he is absolutely a presence that perfectly captures the character on the screen. Everything from the simmering anger and rage that can at times be scary to the lighter, more personable moments with the character. It's all there in his performance. And so the other characters are basically just there to serve Conan's story, but they're all well acted. So you may recognize Nonzo Anazi, who plays Artus from Game of Thrones. He plays Conan's best friend who takes him in and teaches him how to become a pirate. Rachel Nichols, who played Scarlet in the G.I. Joe movie, is Tamara, and Tamara is our love interest. She's essentially a Hyborian nun who the villains are after. And so characters like this are very common in Conan stories, but I think she captures it well, and she actually gets to kick some ass herself, and I think that's really cool. Stephen Lang, who played in James Cameron's Avatar, is our master villain, Kalar Zim. And Zim is this badass warlord who has conquered peoples from all over the world and taken their chieftains as his henchmen. And so he is on this quest to resurrect his wife, who tried to conquer the world and was burned at the stake. And if he can resurrect her, he will bring back the evils of ancient Acheron. It's really Acheron, but I think they changed the pronunciation because Acheron was used in Cole. He has this really cool double-bladed sword, It is a little gimmicky, but I just love distinctive weapons, and this one is just so cool, the different configurations that it can have. I just think it's really cool to have a villain who can fight Conan to a standstill in a sword fight. And Rose McGowan, one of those lead actresses from Charmed, plays a very different kind of witch in The Daughter of Kalar Zim, Marique. And so she is definitely the freakiest, weirdest looking thing in this movie. But I will say that she plays it well. And in Conan movies and stories and comics, oftentimes witches and wizards look so boring. And I'd much rather them go in the opposite direction, even if maybe it's a little bit too much, and make the character look interesting and weird as a wizard or witch should. And by the way, the mandatory hither came Conan narrator we always have to have in these things this time around is Morgan Freeman, and that's pretty cool. My only real complaint about this movie is that the final battle actually felt a little bit generic, and I was a little mystified why magic wasn't used against Conan because you had a witch, you had a magical mask, and for some reason it was all fist fights and sword fights. But other than that, and honestly, I wouldn't even mention that in any other movie. It's just everything leading up to that final battle was so good and so uniquely Conan. I mean, it's certainly the best final battle we've gotten in any Robert E. Howard movie up until then. I just wish they could have made it just a little bit more unique to the character. And there was a comic tie in put out by Dark Horse Comics. This is an extra sized issue. It's not really an adaptation, it's actually the story from the point of view of the villains. And so it leaves out most of the Conan scenes in the movie, but it does have a few scenes here and there that we didn't get in the movie with the villains. So that is kind of interesting. There's also a essay in the back that's pretty long about the history of Acheron or Acheron, however you want to pronounce it. But as you can tell from the artwork on the cover and the fact there are four different inkers on this thing, the artwork was kind of a rush job. And as far as the story goes, it's just kind of okay. But it is an interesting curiosity to have if you are a fan of the movie. By the way, if you're looking for the comic, it's called Conan the Barbarian, The Mask of Acheron. And so, like a lot of movies, this one did not make money. It only made $63.5 million dollars on a $90 million budget. And so I have seen some people who were like, oh, well, that's because of the way it was made, and tried to make, just normal filmmaking sound scandalous. Like, oh, wow, they had the script writer on the set rewriting it as they went. Like, yeah, like 1989 Batman, and that did pretty well. I mean, that's not an unusual situation for a movie. There was fighting between the director and the producers. Yeah, that's kind of how movies get made. And, there was a lot of footage that they shot that didn't make it in there. And again, super normal stuff. However, in recent years, both the director and Jason Momoa have said they weren't pleased with how the movie turned out and blamed the producers. However, they're never specific about whatever their grievance is. And so stuff like this is not unusual in Hollywood, especially when a movie isn't a success. Even though at the time Momoa was best known as a TV star from Stargate Atlantis, he was still able to get some of his suggestions into the movie, like how he gripped his sword in the final battle and the unusual way he held the sword in the very final shot of the movie. There were certainly some scenes that were in the movie comic that were not in the movie with Marique, and Rose McGowan did say she wanted more scenes where Marique had her incestuous lust for her father and was shut down by the producers. But I don't think that's probably it. I would probably guess that it was the ending of the movie they might be referring to. There was a debate about whether Tamara, the love interest, should live or die at the end. And I'm not going to give away the ending of the movie, but let's just say that the director and Jason Momoa were both wanting the opposite of the ending that we actually got. And I think if they'd gotten that ending, it would have been great, but the ending we got was also fine. In a Robert E. Howard story, a character like Tamara could live or die just depending on which story it was. I can see both sides of the argument. I think it was fine. However, all of that only matters if people actually saw the movie, and very few people did. It was a movie that was released when the iron was completely cold. There was zero demand for a new Conan movie, especially a reboot. Heck, there wasn't even demand for any kind of Barbarian movie at the time. The only people who would have wanted a new Conan movie wanted to see Schwarzenegger in that role. They didn't want to see anyone else. They didn't go see that. No one understood why this movie existed except for hardcore fans like me, and there just wasn't enough of us to fill those seats. Game of Thrones had recently started on HBO with Jason Momoa as a barbarian character, and it did quite well its first season with over 2 million viewers per episode on average, but that is nothing compared to what it did starting in that second season with over 11 million viewers on average per episode. It became a household name and a phenomenon. And if Conan the Barbarian, starring Jason Momoa, had been released after that, we would be having an entirely different conversation about the movie. But past is what it is. I don't really care how much money a movie makes as long as I enjoy it, and I did definitely enjoy this movie. And I'd love to see Jason Momoa return to Conan. I think streaming would be perfect for the character. But who knows what the future holds? Maybe we will get more Conan on some kind of screen at some point. But one thing we definitely are getting is Red Sonja, and she is out right now on Blu-ray and DVD. And I am waiting to get my copy of the movie so I can review it. So like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.